This Final Cut Pro 10 Tour presentation is brought to you by the LumaForge ShareStation, the world's best storage for Final Cut 10. For more information on how the ShareStation can improve your workflow, head on over to lumaforge.com.
Thank you for coming, and if you don't know what we do stabilization, tracking solutions, color correction, and soon to come out with a couple of new things. So what I'm going to talk about first is, you might have heard of the way that Final Cut Pro was used on Whiskey Tango Foxtrot to save them a huge amount of time in post-production, save them 10 weeks altogether. So I'm going to quickly talk about what they did to save time. I don't have their footage, but I can talk about the techniques they used. And then I'm going to give you a quick demonstration of our LUTx tool, which is for importing, managing LUT files, including dealing with log footage. Then I'm going to show you the very first demo ever, anywhere, of our NoiseX video noise reduction software, and then go through anything else you want to see in more detail. So, very nice quote there from the director that he thought ours was the most valuable tool, apart from Final Cut Pro itself, obviously, on the project. And it was a huge job. They had 1,200 VFX shots to do, 20 people on the team. They were doing VFX mock-ups on set while they were shooting in order to know that they had the shot. Right, so that saved them a huge amount of shoot days, because they could just do a couple of takes, put them together, look at them without having to go to After Effects or Nuke or whatever. The editors could actually put together temp comps themselves, and then the director could say, yep, we got it. We don't need to do any more takes, move on. It saved them actually 10 weeks of post-production by using these techniques. And every shoot day was $250,000 US. So that adds up very quickly. One of the things they did is they had a lot of complex split screens where you had one actor on one side, one actor on the other, and they were combining different takes together. And they were all handheld. So that was a case of stabilizing each one, drawing a mask between them, which was often a very irregular mask, and then putting them together and being able to see that the action worked with the two takes combined together. And again, know that they could move on, didn't have to do any more takes. Also, the higher quality temp comps that Editorial was showing made it a lot easier to get approval from studio execs. Again, so the studio execs would be confident that they could move on and they had exactly what they needed already. So I'm going to show you a couple of examples of that. So this example here, this is again not the real footage, obviously, but it's a similar thing to what they actually did. Actually, she hesitated, and they want to use only the start and the end of the shot, because there's a big pause in between that we don't want to use. Now, you could do a morph cut, but in this case, with the moving background like this, if you did a morph cut, you'd see the background change in a distracting way. So to get around things like that and say, okay, I want to cut out 5 seconds of dead time from this take and just use the start and end, what you would do using SliceX is you would create masks for her, which literally only took me a few minutes. So I'll turn off this one here. Okay, so I've got one mask which is just her body, which doesn't move that much, right? So I'll just make the arm come out here a bit. And then I've put another mask on top of that for the head, which I've tracked using SliceX. Now, one thing that's very important is that Mocha is a planar tracker. So it's looking, when you track something, it's trying to look for something which is approximately a flat surface. Now, the front of someone's face is a flat surface, but if you draw the shape around the front and the side, it's not a flat surface, so it won't track correctly, right? So in this case, if I was to draw the shape around everything, including the hair, it would slip as it changes perspective. But what I can do is I can just do the front of the face, and then I can keyframe once I've got a good track, then I can keyframe so it covers the hair as well. So let's go and track that. Now again, you can see it slipped as she turns her head, which again is because of a perspective change. Okay, just let that finish. Okay, so then you'll notice that on the first frame, these points are yellow, right? That means there's a keyframe already set on that frame. Right now, the default is that keyframing is turned on. This is the icon to turn it on and off. So in this case, I only want to use shape keyframing. I don't want to keyframe the position. You can do that as well, but if you want to keyframe the position, you just do that using by dragging it and using the standard keyframe controls. Let's zoom in a bit so we can see what we're doing more. Okay, so what I would do is just step through and see, okay, it's slipping off there. Now just start dragging it out. And in this case, I want to include the hair as well, so I can drag that out. Now, then these arrows here go back to the last keyframe or forward to the next keyframe. So if I go back to the start, you can also hold down the command key and drag, and that lets you select multiple points to keyframe, which makes it a lot faster. So then I can say, okay, I want to put this up here. We can click to add a point as well. Even after we've tracked, we can add additional shape points and the shape will still keep the track. So then let's go and jump to the next keyframe. Okay, and then start going through like this. Now, oops, now go through again. So that would be the general procedure. I just step through adding as many keyframes as I needed, and generally it still saved you a huge amount of time over just keyframing without any tracking. There it slips off, so it's important when it moves quickly like that, you need to keyframe the start and the end of the move. So I keyframe here, and then I go to where it's slipped the most, and then keyframe it again. And then it'll stay consistently throughout that move. And generally, I might need to add, say, maybe 20 keyframes or something for this, and then you'd get a nice, clean result. All I did is draw a shape around the head, and then tracked it, and then did a few keyframes to adjust that. So now what I've got is the 3 layers. What I can do then is I can just take this whole thing and duplicate it, all the layers, in case I mess up. Okay, duplicate that, another version of it. So if I just get rid of this one, then of course she'll pop, the background pops. What I would do then in that case is I would just use the continuous background. So leave the background in, and instead on the top layers I've made, when I get rid of these, now what you'll see is that obviously I need to put dissolves in to make it perfect, but the background will keep going continuously, and there's only just the pop in her, which I could smooth out with a dissolve or with a morph cut if I wanted to, either way. So that's just one thing they did to very quickly make editorial decisions. Another example is, let's see, there's this shot here, which, again, this is not the actual footage, just something similar. And let's say you wanted to put in a watchtower on top of this thing here to make it look like it's got a guard tower on top. Very, very easy. So I will actually show you the tracking on this one. So let's just get rid of that. Duplicate this. And put it over here. So in this case, I just go to Track Layer, TrackX, and oops, put that on top. Go back to here. So in this case, I'm going to track backwards because it starts out off screen. So it's easier for me to start with it on screen and track backwards. So in that case, I just go to the plugin, and I'm going to draw the track shape here. and then just say track backwards. Yep, come on. You can see how quickly that's able to do it. And this is using the same Mocha tracker that's in Mocha Pro, which costs $1,000. But you get it in Final Cut for $99 or $149, depending on which bundle you get. So after I've done that, what you would do is drop in the clip I want, which is this one, apply, go to surface, and then I'd have to basically drag that out to reposition it. Now in this case I've already done that, so I'll show you what I did earlier, and that's tracked in. Now obviously that's a very rough comp. I don't have the actual stuff they used, but that gives you an idea of how quickly you can do set extensions. You can use the same technique to hide something. If there's a power line or satellite dish or something you don't want, you can just clone a bit of the sky or a bit of the another building or whatever over the top to hide it very, very quickly. Okay, so let's go on to LUTx. This came out about April this year. You might have seen it already. And there is a few different LUT managers already for Final Cut Pro, and there is some built-in log processing, which is quite basic. But our one, we think, has a few things which is pretty unique. Our LUT manager is a lot more powerful than the other ones, and it gives you a bunch of the most common camera conversion LUTs. And that doesn't expire. That's completely free. You only have to pay if you want our LUT collections and the graphical LUT manager, which lets you import your own LUTs and organize them into collections. So there is actually quite a big limitation in Final Cut Pro's log management, which you might have seen or run into. And the free version lets you get around this problem, which I'm going to show you in just a second. So here's an example, ungraded clip. And what I'm going to do is go to LUTx, and you can see there's 4 different templates there. These two, the LUT Basic and Camera LUT, are completely free, and then the other 2 are the ones you pay for if you want them. So in this case, I'm actually going to use a Look LUT, right? Because this is already in video color space; it doesn't need to be converted from log. And then a couple of unique things is that in our plugin, you can do a pre-adjustment before the lookup table of exposure overall or in different channels, right? So if you've got white balance problems or exposure problems, you correct them before you apply the lookup table. And I'll explain why that's really important in a second. But first of all, let's just show you. Okay, so this is our LUT browser, and you'll notice that it shows you all the LUTs on the actual clip you're looking at straight away. And you can even preview here, you can wipe on and off, right? And it'll show you the difference between each one. We can make those much bigger, and then you can go and wipe on and off and see exactly what it does. So in this case, let's go into, which one do I want? I want this one here. Right, so also you can then just drag backwards and forwards to see before and after the LUT. And you can also, another quite unique feature is that we can choose to apply these LUTs differently on shadows, midtones, highlights. So if I turn this on, right, so now this is saying, okay, it's 100% shadows, midtones, and highlights, but I could say pull it back in the shadows and the midtones and have it only in the highlights. Right, now also, if you want to define what the shadows, midtones, and highlights are, you just drag this, right, and you see this, the preview pops up at the bottom. That's actually showing you the left mask is what is considered the shadows, the middle mask is what is the midtones, the right mask is the highlights. So I could say, okay, I want to push more of it into the highlights by dragging this up and down. Right, and then I can say, okay, I want to put a bit more back into the midtones. And that lets you really just take one of our LUTs as a starting point, but then really customize it, make it your own. Of course, you can also use 2 copies of the plugin, put 2 different LUTs on one clip and say, one LUT is in the highlights, one's in the shadows. Right, so that's some pretty cool stuff. You can also mask the LUTs with a bunch of built-in gradient tools. So we can say, I only want the LUT on the top of the screen, or inside a vignette, outside a vignette. And altogether, we do believe this is the best LUT solution for Final Cut, and it's only $29 for one LUT collection. Now, I said I was going to show you the problem with Final Cut's log correction. So this is a clip shot in log with a lot of exposure, very, very overexposed. Now, if we say, okay, this was Blackmagic Design. Now, if I go Blackmagic Design, it's clipping to white all across there, and it's lost detail that you can't get back. Even if I go to the color board and try and grade this down, you can see how flat it is. It's just lost that information altogether. And this is because the built-in log processing, you absolutely cannot do anything before you apply it, and it always clips. So then if we go to my solution, well, CoreMelt solution, and we'll get rid of this and get rid of the color board. Oops, sorry, wrong one. Okay, so in this case we're going to apply the camera LUT, and again this is the free LUT plugin, and we're going to choose Blackmagic. Okay. Now, again, that's blown out, but if I do the pre-exposure and bring it down, you can see it's still got all the beautiful detail in the clouds there. So by using the pre-exposure or red, green, blue, and then doing your log conversion, you can actually use all the dynamic range, which is in your log footage, which you can't actually do using the built-in log tool in Final Cut. At the moment, and we're about to add a bunch more, right, in a free update, but at the moment we've got Arri Alexa, Blackmagic, Canon S-Log, Nikon, Panasonic, a couple of different variations, Redlog, Sony, 4 variations, no more than that, S-Log 2 and S-Log with variations of each, and Technicolor CineStyle. I don't have the list, but we're going to add about another 5 or 6 in a free update in a couple of weeks' time. Okay, so NoiseX is in beta at the moment, and we've got the functionality we want. We're just optimizing it and working on the user interface. So the difference between what we're doing and what other people are doing is that we do the denoise, but then we actually look at, okay, how does the human visual system perceive noise? And a lot of places you can't notice it just because of the type of content in that area. So what we do is we back off the denoise so that it only does it in the areas where it actually stands out. So you preserve more of the original image, which is what we're calling perceptual denoise. And we're also going to try and make it a lot easier to use than some of the other solutions and give you a lot of presets to start with. So you don't have to do so much trial and error. You can just say, okay, this is digital noise of this type, this ISO, and you've got a preset for it to start with, and then you just tweak it a little bit. It will also include tracked masks. So for example, if you want to isolate the denoise to everything except someone's face, then if you have a SliceX license as well, you'll be able to denoise everything except the tracked face, right? Or do a softer setting on the tracked face. And as well as denoise, it will also be regrain as well, because actually it's good practice. Whenever you denoise, you should add a little bit of real grain back again to stop it looking too fake. So we'll have options for procedural grain or grain scanned from 16 and 35mm film. Now, this is not a very extreme example, but it's a very common example where I don't know if you're going to be able to see it on the screen there, but there is quite an annoying amount of noise in his jacket. Okay, so first of all, the standard denoise, right, if I just go and adjust the settings a little bit, okay, and then zoom in here. Now, that's done a reasonably good job, but you can see if I go up to the top and turn it on and off that it is actually destroying some of the detail in the hair. Right, so that's a uniform denoise across the whole thing. And let's go back to Let's get rid of that and instead put the new one on. So in this case, again, I'm going to put roughly the same settings, but then I'm going to show you how it works to protect the details. Okay, so let's go back to fit. So now what I'm going to do is show you how we're isolating and protecting areas. So this is showing you, this red is now showing you it's doing uniform across the entire screen. It's denoising everything. But actually what I want to do is adjust it like this. So the red areas are the noise priority areas where it's going to be most noticeable. Right, so I want to put that about there, and then I want to bring in the detail protection, and it's working out areas of high detail using a couple of different techniques, and using less noise, denoise in those areas. So when you get that kind of look, it's like the red is going to be denoised more, the green is going to be protected. Very, very easy to adjust depending on your black levels or overall in the clip. And then if I go back to this and you have a look at the difference, it's protecting a lot more detail in the hair while it's still getting rid of everything down you need in the blacks. Now again, this is still in beta, so I'm not going to actually show you it rendering because we've still got to optimize, get the speed up a lot. That's the next thing we're doing. But that's how it's going to work, which I think is pretty interesting and will get you better results for most of the other solutions. The plugins work in order. We would generally recommend you denoise first and then put the grade on after that, because otherwise if you're raising the blacks, you'll raise the noise up. It will be available before the Creative Summit, one way or the other. We'll finish it by then. Pricing, probably $79, but we could decide to change that, but there'll be an introductory special as well. So that's competitive with Neat Video. And yeah, look, Neat Video is great, and it's a very clever tool, but we think this is going to be easier to use for most editors because Neat Video is very opaque, and also it tends to be a bit flaky, it crashes a bit. Basically, it will have normal masks built in, just like a non-tracked mask will be built in. If you want tracked masks, then you'll need to have a license of SliceX as well. Obviously, we'll sell bundles of SliceX and NoiseX as well. All right, thank you very much for coming.